Hello, everybody. James here, WSI, and we've got a repeat customer. He kept his receipt and he's coming back for more. And I know you want to hear more from him too. He's one of our most popular guests. Instead of rattling off a list of his accomplishments, I will simply say, "Hello, Sean."
Hello, James.
How are you keeping? God, we've been talking, righting some wrongs the last 15, 20 minutes, haven't we?
We sure have. We sure have. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're doing good there. You're blowing up all over the place. Congratulations
Oh,
on that.
thank you very much. I'm hoping to do more with you as well. As I said before, you're one of our most popular guests. I think in total, with the full interview and all the clips that came out, something like 700 or 800,000 people watched them.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it is very happy to have you back on, let me tell you. And also, I think I said this to you before, your YouTube channel, even though we barely mentioned it, got another 1,500 subs that month as well, so it's done quite well. But
Yes. Thank you for that.
no worries, no worries. For now, though, we had so many questions come in the first time you were in. So what I do is I say, hey, subscribers of WSI, we've got so-and-so coming in, please give me some questions. And there were so many questions that we didn't get to on the first episode that essentially this is all the other questions we didn't get to. It is a legitimate part two in that sense. So if you're happy to crack on, I've got 2 hours, 4 hours worth of fan questions, and away we go.
Heck yeah. Let's roll.
Okay, super duper. First one is, and this is going to be a very quick question, as Mark Keegan says, he saw Val in a shoot interview years ago wearing a Leeds Rhinos jersey. I'm a rugby league fan as well, Warrington. Does he still follow rugby, or was it just something you wore?
It was just something I wore. I love the game rugby. I don't follow it so much anymore like I used to when I was a kid. Used to follow it a lot more, and I only really followed it back then because I was playing it, so I had a lot more interest in it. But when I was wrestling over in England, that jersey was given to me. That was one of my favorite jerseys too. I thought it was the coolest looking jersey ever. But yeah, no, I don't follow rugby. I haven't for years and years. But it's a great game. I love rugby. Fantastic rugby, and another game called lacrosse, which believe it or not is Canada's national game. I always thought it was hockey. Even growing up there, I thought hockey was Canada's national game. It's not. It's actually lacrosse.
Yeah, you will get smashed over the head at least 8 times a game. I mean, I played lacrosse
Oh
a
yeah.
very tiny bit when I was younger, and Jesus, you get the lumps on your head from it.
Oh yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah, it's a rough game. It's a rough game.
Yeah, but you want it to be a rough game, though, don't you? That's the
Oh,
point.
absolutely. Got to get the adrenaline going. That's the key. That's part of the greatness of being a man is you want to seek that adrenaline sometimes. And the only way you can seek that adrenaline is getting a little closer to that border of absolute danger, right? That's where the adrenaline starts to pump. And that's where I think a lot of male species love to be, right on that edge of adrenaline.
Are you an adrenaline junkie then? Do you do all the extreme sports and stuff, or do you just like the physicality of whatever?
Yeah, back when I was younger, I was a lot more of an adrenaline junkie, right? Back when you really don't think anything bad's going to happen. As you get older, you realize bad things happen. So yeah, I'm not so much of an adrenaline junkie anymore, but it was something, as a man, you find those opportunities to get that adrenaline pumping, and you sometimes you just decide to take it. It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I'll move off this in a second, but I've definitely found I've become more as time makes cowards of us all. I'm definitely more of a coward than I was in my 20s.
Ain't that the truth? Yep, yeah, that's the truth.
Next question, Kieran Treacy or Treaky. What are your thoughts on CM Punk being fired and the whole elite drama that's been going on for months? I don't know how much wrestling you follow, but I mean, even if you follow a tiny bit, you can't help but have heard the drama unfolding.
Sure, yeah. CM Punk getting fired. I don't know what happened there. CM Punk he's a different character. He's a different kind of guy. I didn't know CM Punk, real well at all. I had his first match in WWE when his tryout match. We told a very simple story in that match, a story that everybody could understand, and nobody knew in the arena who CM Punk was at the time. So we really had to make him before we beat him, right? And we just told a story with the leg. It worked out real well, and he got a job there. And really, other than that, and being backstage, for a short period of time there with them, I guess it was a couple of years. I really didn't know CM Punk, so I really don't know how he is. Once you got to remember, I left the WWE um, shortly after CM Punk really started to get a push, and that was that Black Friday there where I got ousted with a after that housing crisis. I was out with a shoulder injury, and I was ousted after that. And so I didn't have other than a couple of years with CM Punk. So I really didn't get to know his personality all that well. But from what I'm hearing, he's he can be hard to work with, I guess, is from what I understand. I don't know how true that is, but he can be difficult to work with, is what I'm hearing back. And but one thing you got to say about CM Punk, the guy sets goals and he goes after them regardless of what the outcomes are. I mean, I thought that was amazing that he decided he wanted to leave wrestling and go try mixed martial arts with no competitive experience at all. And he went out and did it. And in my view, put aside the first match, his second UFC fight was pretty good. I mean, for a guy that's never really been in the cage at all, he did, not too bad. But to see a guy that gets up and he's a go-getter and you take that attitude and combine it with business, I mean, that can make for a toxic mix-up. And maybe that's what you have there. I don't know for sure with CM Punk. Seeing him get fired, and just from what I understand, from what I've heard, I mean, you went after a guy backstage and not expect to get fired. I mean,
including the owner.
Oh, he went after the owner, like Tony Khan?
He went after Tony Khan after he went
I
after
didn't
Jungle
hear that.
Boy. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear that. So, okay, so give me the rundown then. What's the rundown on this?
Oh,
that's known so far.
He's been fired. He apparently went to lunge after Tony Khan after he already tried to put Jungle Boy in a chokehold or a guillotine, essentially. So that's really the reason he was fired.
Yeah, anytime you're gonna throw down with another human being just because you're mad at something they said or whatever the case may be, yeah, that's grounds for firing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I don't get this idea of human beings putting their hands on other human beings because you're mad. You know what I mean? Like, we're human beings. We have brains. We have mouths. Talk it out. Figure it out. You know what I mean? But to get angry and go after them, it's I don't know. That's a different type of human being other than I would prefer to deal with.
We're going to move on to your wrestling career. Now, obviously, we ran through a lot of the earlier stuff in our first interview. So we're going to start somewhere in 1998. Apart from this one question, I really wanted to ask you, Aerodynamic Salamander, are the stories about the Yakuza in Japan wrestling true? Do they really send women to the wrestlers' hotel rooms and accommodate them with luxurious dinners? Did you interact with any Yakuza or hear anything about them, see them while in Japan?
So I never had women sent to my room. I can't say I'm not saying that's not true. I never had that experience. I never heard that. But we did get taken out for pretty extravagant dinners every once in a while. And it was cool. We get on the bus afterwards, and sometimes Johnny Laurinaitis, my first run in Japan there, he was the booker for All Japan Pro Wrestling. And we get on the bus and he goes, guys, throw your bags in the room when you get to the hotel. We're going out for dinner. And that's when you're going out with the guys, kind of, so to speak. And the times that we went out with them for dinner, they closed the restaurant down and it was only open for us wrestlers. So that was pretty cool. I liked it. I had a good time over there. They treated us well. And it was memorable. It was great memories to be made with a lot of the guys over there, working the tours and All Japan Pro Wrestling. And yeah, so no, I never had anybody sent to my hotel room, but we did get extravagant dinners.
How do you know what the Yakuza look like? Because I know the finger thing, like either for loyalty or disloyalty. I can never remember.
Yeah, I never saw any of that. Any things that would, obviously be the sign that you would be told to look for, a missing finger or whatever the case may be. But, we saw guys dressed to the nines, dressed in like suits that, were, dumped a lot of money on for sure. And then you get other guys that were dressed completely normal. You wouldn't even know they were part of the Yakuza. You'd never know it. You know what I mean? Unless someone told you. So I don't know. It was, I never saw anything extravagant out there that would make me go, oh, that guy's, one of them. but you know who they are. Like, you know who they are when they come into the building. That's for sure.
What is it with
Word
wrestling?
gets around real quick.
Oh,
Word gets around real quick.
is it one of those? Right, this is out the back of my mind, but there's a lot more like crowd brawling, or there was in Japan at one point. You know, because the fans like getting hit there. They see it as, you know, part of the show, I suppose. Were you ever told, do not go to that corner of the arena because that's where they're all sitting, or do you just know that?
No, it was I was never told any of that. I don't remember, having any issues of not being able to wrestle in certain areas of the arena. Of course, most of my matches in Japan were always within either the ring or around the ring. I was never one to go out into the audience back then. I was a younger guy when I first started with All Japan, so our stuff was basically to stay in the ring, and you leave the outside the ring and in the fans brawling to the guys that have been around a lot longer at that time. If you do it in the beginning of the show, it doesn't mean as much at the end of the show, so to speak. And I was more at the beginning of the show at that time period of my career. And so we kept most of the stuff in the ring. So I was never told, "Hey, don't go over there because so and so's sitting over there." Yeah, that never happened with me, but I'm sure it happened with guys that were higher up in the card that were definitely going to go out into the crowd.
Yeah, I think Sabu may have told me that once, that I think he just went out into the crowd just to prove a point, I think. Who knows? We will move on. And this is actually something I wanted to ask you. And when you were in the WWF, I'm sorry we skipped a few years ahead now, but were you ever stationed in Connecticut or with Brett or anything like that to sort of train up a bit before you debuted in the WWF?
No, what we did do is I was wrestling in Mexico at this point in time, full time, but they did bring me up to the television studio for 2 weeks. It was a 2 week camp. I think it was one of their first ones, and Edge was in on that as well. There was a few guys in that. Ahmed Johnson was there, and we were just in the television studio in the ring, just basically practicing and performing and giving the office a chance to see what we can do in the ring. Now, this was before they set up any kind of, developmental territory or anything like that. And I was up there for 2 weeks rolling around in the ring and then sent back to Mexico. And then it was shortly after that they started building the developmental program, I guess.
What were they looking for at the time out of you in those 2 weeks?
I think they were just, and I don't know. I don't know specifically what it was they were looking for, if there was anything specific they were looking for. From what I gathered, what I could see happening, in that television studio was they were seeing if guys were polished, seeing if guys could tell a story in the ring. Like they'd say, "Hey, go in the ring, give me 10 minutes. You're up, you're down. Let's see what you can do." And I think they were looking for guys that could tell stories in the ring. They're looking for, the execution of the moves, the selling. How polished are you? Are you polished enough that they can take you and package you up and use you in their wrestling product? And that's kind of the feeling I got while I was there. Was that's what they were looking for, just to see, where are the dollar signs and what I have before me wrestling in this ring. And you had some brainiacs there just turning the wheels while they're watching us perform and just trying to figure out how they could monetize. When I'm in the ring, they're thinking, how can we monetize this greatness? And other people in the ring, how can we monetize these guys that have to follow greatness?
Well, you mentioned Ahmed Johnson there, so maybe they were looking at him and going, how do we get this guy to not hurt himself or others as much?
Good point. There's a little story about Ahmed Johnson. Now, I don't know the guy. It's the only time I ever met him was in that camp. And so other than that, I don't know the guy. But Pat Patterson was there, and they said, okay, it's going to be Sean, Ahmed Johnson. I can't remember what they said. They said, give me 8 minutes or something like that. And Pat Patterson pointed at me, he goes, "You're up," and pointed to Ahmed and said, "You're down. Give me whatever it was, 8 minutes." And Ahmed Johnson put his arm around Pat Patterson and kind of walked off a little bit. And a few minutes later, Pat Patterson comes up and he goes, because they wanted me to go up with the splash off the top rope. Now, it wasn't even called the money shot. Nobody had named it the money shot. I just called it the splash. That was it at this point in time. "You're going to hit him with the splash." he just came to me and said that he doesn't think it's a good idea because he's been on WWE TV at that point. I haven't. He goes, he doesn't think it's a good idea that you should hit him with the splash and beat him because you haven't had any WWF TV. And I looked at Pat in disbelief. We're in a friggin' television studio performing for you. And he goes, I'm just saying. And he turned around and walked away. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there's no fans there. It's not like it's getting recorded. It's literally just a show, right? Just show what you can do. And he didn't want me to go over. It was unbelievable. I still went over, but it was
with the splash.
With the splash, but it was unbelievable. He tried to talk Pat out of, I don't think this is such a good idea that, this kid goes over on me with a splash off the top rope. I mean, look at me. It's just like, oh my God, are you serious? So yeah, that was my unreal.
Is that the only time anyone's refused to lose to you?
Yeah. And not even on a show. It was literally just for, performing in front of the office so they could see what you do. Yeah, just in the television studio. Unbelievable.
Do you know, I love a story about Ahmed Johnson. He always surprises you with the stories that you just never, that you sort of expect, yet you're still surprised when you hear it.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Oh, just before we get off this as well, now there was a rumor, a story going round that there was going to be a new, and I use the word new very specifically, tag team, the new Midnight Express, and there was eventually it would be Bart Gunn and Bob Holly, Bodacious Bart and the other one, I can't remember the other nickname. And originally it was suggested,
Bodacious Bart.
Was it Bodacious? Bombastic Bob. That's what it was.
Oh, Bombastic Bob?
It was one of those. They were alliterative. I know that. But originally it was supposedly said that you and Edge were going to be the new Midnight Express. Is there any truth to that?
I didn't hear that until several years later. I had no idea. No one ever came to me with that idea or anything like that. It might have been spoken about, you know what I mean? But I never heard of it up until probably, almost maybe 7-8 years later after the fact. Yeah. So I didn't even know that was happening. I had no clue that people were discussing that. I think it was Edge that told me originally, but it was years later.
So did you ever hear of any other, because obviously you become the porn star character Val Venis, but were you ever told that you may become something else that never made it to TV, or was that the only thing?
No, that was the only thing. The only time that they mentioned that we'll figure something else out was when they first presented the character to me. And it was Vince McMahon that had called me. I was still wrestling in Mexico. He called me early in the morning from Connecticut. And he said, hey, we have this character. We want to make sure you feel comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And he spelled it out for me, Venis, which kind of was like, what Venis? You understand what's going on here, kind of. And he goes, now, Val Venis was a former film star turned pro wrestler. Now, the first thing that pops in my head is Hogan, Jesse Ventura. That's already been done. Mm. And then Vince McMahon goes, it's actually a former adult film star turned pro wrestler. And that's when I was like, okay, now I get it. This has not been done before. This could be great. And I love the idea as soon as it came out of his mouth. And then he told me, think on it for 24 hours. Make sure you feel comfortable playing the character, because if you don't feel comfortable playing that character of a former porn star turned pro wrestler, then the character's not going to work. And we don't want to waste time and money in investing in something that isn't going to work because you don't feel comfortable playing it. You got to feel comfortable playing it. If you don't feel comfortable with this, let us know so we can figure out something else to present to you. And that's the only time that, WWF ever, I mean, they wanted to make sure I was comfortable playing it. Mm. They wanted to make sure all the weight for success was on that side of success. And me not feeling comfortable playing a character, that could take a little weight away from the success side of things and put it on the side of things that's contradictory to success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, but I felt comfortable. As soon as he said it was a former porn star turned pro wrestler, I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. I am so in.
I would read that as in, if you're not comfortable with this character, we'll figure out something else. But in my mind, while you were saying that, I was reading it, if you're not comfortable with this character, your ass is back to Mexico.
Could have been. Could have been. Yeah, that could be very true. Now, at that point in time, they had signed me to a contract. So, they had to pay me. So that, you had to put the weight where it is. The fact that they had to pay me no matter what anyway at that point. They're probably trying to look for some way to monetize me. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, that could absolutely, hey, if you're not feeling comfortable with this character, you can stay down in Mexico. That's, I mean, the amount of money they were paying me, I'm sure if they just wanted to cut that, it wouldn't have mattered to them one iota.
We shall move on. The Master Bastard, as called himself. What was Goldust / Dustin Rhodes like to work with during your angle with him and Terry Runnels?
Dustin's, I can't speak highly enough about him. I may disagree with his politics, but Dustin's he's a machine in the industry. He's a beast. He's a good-hearted guy. He's passionate about the business. He's a good dude, man. I loved working Dustin. It was one of the highlights of my career was working with Dustin. It was so much fun. He's so fun to work in the ring. Him and I guess, we have our differences politically, but as far as working with Dustin, I could work with that guy till I'm 150 years old. He was awesome to work with. He was easy to work with, very, very professional, and it's just a lot of fun. Funny guy, super funny guy.
Let's just before I delve into that slightly more, was he doing the very brief born again Christian thing at the time when he?
Yeah,
man, what was that about?
Yeah. He, I guess he had, given up his ways of the past and decided that I was the Val Venis character was pushing the envelope too far, and he was gonna come and save everybody. You know what I mean? And so he was Dustin Reynolds coming back, and I don't know how much he liked the character itself, but he played it to a T. Remember him walking through it during my matches? He'd be walking through the crowd with that sign. Oh, it was great. It was great. Yeah, he was a lot of fun to work with.
Do you know, because you mentioned with Dustin before, you said, he was just the easiest person to work with. More specifically, what makes somebody very, very easy and fun to wrestle?
When you're talking about mechanics in the ring, glass smooth. I mean, you kind of on the same page at all times. Everything just seems to fall in place. The moves look good. Everything's connecting. It's a solid match. But what really makes it fun is Dustin will go out there and make you laugh out there. And when you can see that he's just playing around, he's so confident in his abilities that he'll goof around out there. Like when we go to lock up, a couple of times I'd go to lock up with him, collar and elbow tie up. It's called a collar and elbow tie up for a reason. As I'm going for a collar and elbow tie up, this guy will take both of his hands and slap my sides, the sides of my waist while I'm going for it. Was the most ridiculous thing. And as soon as he'd smack my sides, I'd push him away and I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? And he'd be laughing over there. And I'd be like, oh my God. Because he would goof around like that, it just kind of made the match even more fun because the fans didn't really understand, what he was doing. They just thought it was part of the show, part of the match. You know what I mean? But he's out there joking around with me while we're trying to make this thing look like a fight. To the fans, it looks like a fight. You know what I mean? But to us, it was like, man, he's just messing with me again. He's just a lot of fun to work with. I'm
going to steal Blue Meanie's stuff. Hello, Blue Meanie, by the way.
Blue Meanie, what's up, brother?
Oh, he's such a nice dude, Blue Meanie. And he told me a story where, that thing in the corner where he sits you up and then he gives you the kick.
Oh, yeah. What was that called? The
Shattered Dreams.
Something.
Just that was it.
Yeah, Shattered Dreams. Dreams.
I mean, as you say, he's so smooth, but still, when you're prostrate or whatever word you want to use, as vulnerable as you can possibly be, there's got to be something going through your mind to say, please don't kick me in the balls. Please don't kick me in the balls when you're taking it.
You just took the words right out of my own head. I'd be sitting there with my legs straddled on each robe, wide open. And what you just said is exactly what I'm thinking the whole time I see him running at me. Please let this be okay. Please let this be okay.
As I mentioned Blue Meanie before, he did it once and his balls fell out live on Raw.
I didn't know that, really?
Yes. Was that ever a worry for you?
No, no, that was nowhere. I was pretty solidly stashed away in my trunks there. Yeah, for sure.
That's the spirit. And it's still on. It's still on the WWE network, but I can't remember what episode it is. But I don't know how many people are going to be rushing out there to see it for themselves. But I don't know. Who knows? There's going to be some people who want
The
to.
one with Blue Meanie, his balls coming out.
Yeah, it really does. It just you don't notice it, but it's just go bloop, like that. Just a little bit of brain peeks out.
Really?
Yeah.
A little bit of brain. That's excellent.
We'll move on. Next question. I'm sorry, this is the one that you've, I'm sure, been asked a million times. But Brainbuster Pro Wrestling, he says, memories of working with Kai and Tai and the angle involving Yamaguchi trying to cut off your dick with a samurai sword. So before we go to obviously that bit, how come you were so involved with the entirety of Kai and Tai's feud for months on end? It seemed.
Well, that's a good question. At the time, the writers were, they had storylines written for pretty much every single match on the card. And it just seemed like, with my match, the storyline writers, I think for the storyline writers, it was a fun character to write for. For the guys that were there at the time, like Vince Russo and his crew of guys, and it just seemed like they had every week I'd come in and they'd have more, the storyline continue, and it just kept going and going. And they were pushing the envelope at the time, and that was what I would consider, fitting the bill for pushing that envelope. Is the whole Kai and Tai Val Venis, choppy the PP storyline off. Yeah, I remember getting to the arena that night. They told me they were gonna, do the old chopping block thing, and I was like, "Are we really putting this on TV?" And they're like, "Yup," and I'm like, "Wow, I can't believe that." I had no issues with it at all. I just couldn't believe we were going to create it and it was actually going to go out on TV. I was amazed by that. I was like, I can't believe we're really doing this. And when it actually went out, I was, broadcast, and I watched it back. I was like, looking at it, I go, man, we created that. And that's an envelope pushing, I guess you could say, memory created for a lot of fans that even to this day, I mean, that's one of the most popular storylines that people come up and speak to me about is the choppy the PP angle. You know what I mean? So it was a memory creating time in WWE where all the memories that were created for the fans, I think, and I'm not trying to blow my own horn here because obviously I'm just one of the actors in the piece of this puzzle. The writers are the ones that created all this. But it's memories that's created in the fans' minds where the Kai and Tai choppy the PP thing, I think, will be in people's minds till the day they take their last breath on planet Earth. And it's to be a part of that. I mean, how many people on this planet can say I was a part of a storyline that so many wrestling fans will remember for the rest of their lives? Not a lot of people can say that. And it was an honor to be a part of that. We had writers, everything was in place. The writers were in place and the writers were on their game. The talent was in the right place at the right time, and they were on top of their game. And it just seemed to work out really well, really, really well.
Yeah, I'm going to be bringing some more of that up in a couple of minutes. I'll stick with not the choppy. The amount of times you said choppy your pee with a straight face as well. It just goes to show you just how many times you've had to say those 4 words.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever get friendly or anything with any of the Kai and Tai group? Because obviously Taka and Funaki stayed around for a while. Then there was Wally Yamaguchi-san, who I believe died not too long ago. In fact, but I think wasn't he like a photographer in Japan or something like that, or was he a manager in Japan? Where did he come from?
Yamaguchi-san?
Yeah,
Yamaguchi-san. I guess he'd been, in the Japanese wrestling industry for quite a while. So he came out of Japan, but I rode with Taka a little bit here and there. Taka and I, we were decent friends back then. We still online every once in a very blue moon we'll say, hey, what's up, chat. We just did the whole 25th anniversary of the Kai and Tai thing. We talked back and forth online a few times about that. Taka to me was the guy I was most closest to, and I think it was because we had the same connection to Victor Quinones in Puerto Rico. I was wrestling for Carlos Colon in Puerto Rico, and I had met Victor down there. Victor's one of the guys that was in an integral part of getting me moved into Mexico from Puerto Rico. And Taka Michinoku was already working with Victor Quinones at the time. So that was really my first time meeting Taka was in Puerto Rico. And so, I knew Taka, quite a bit before I even got to WWE, but he was the guy I knew the most out of all the other guys. Yeah.
I've heard this story as well once, that Taka would pretend that he didn't know as much English as he actually did. Is that true?
Yeah, he was a smart guy. When he didn't want to do something, it was like, huh, 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 But I don't know. I never really had an issue with that at all. I mean, we talked because he spoke Spanish more than he did English at the time. And so, and Tajuri too. Tajuri was another one. I could speak more in Spanish to them than I would in English, believe it or not. And so I never had an issue with that. But did other guys possibly? I've heard stories about other guys having issues with communicating with them.
A couple more things on the same thing. Mrs. Yamaguchi, she was in, as you were on storyline, in and out very quickly. Where did she come from?
From what I understand, she was a model. They hired her from a modeling agency. I think that's what she came for. From what I can recall, that's what I was told. She came from a modeling agency. I don't think she was in wrestling per se at any point in time other than WWE.
And the last one, working with John Wayne Bobbitt, of all people, for that 1 week. Did he even understand what was... Tell me the story.
Oh, this guy, I'll tell you, hey, any guy that goes and actually in real life gets the choppy the pee done, hey, I got all the empathy in the world for you. But this guy, honestly, and like I got to be fair here. I can't say specifically that he's the dumbest man I've ever met in the world, because I really, other than what he came in for, the few times with WWE to do some stuff with us, I don't know the guy. But I can tell you this, the several hours that I spent with him backstage, I came to the conclusion this is literally the dumbest human being on the planet, literally. And you start to get the idea of why his ex-wife would go to the extent of, committing a crime against him like that. But the only thing I can think of when I think of that man, John Wayne Bobbitt, is the dumbest man I've ever met. Literally, there's no other easy or nice way to put it. I mean, he was cool. He wasn't causing problems. He was all right just to hang around. But when he opens his mouth, nothing but dumbness comes out. I mean, to the point where you're like, oh my God, just get me away from this guy. It's literally the dumbest man I've ever met in my life.
Well, I mean, did he not even understand his role? Like, walk out here, look sad. Could he not even get that, or was it just other things he was saying rather than production issues?
He really didn't really do a whole lot out in front of that camera, that's for sure. But regardless of that, it was all about the big Val Boski anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it was the stuff he was saying backstage. I mean, this guy 24/7, the hours that I spent with him, it was nothing but dick jokes that weren't even funny. But he would laugh, he would say his own joke, and then he'd burst out laughing at it. And I'm standing there looking at him like straight face, like, am I missing something here? You know what I mean? Like, why are you laughing at your own joke? And I don't even get it. You know what I mean? And other people are walking by going, really, is he doing that? And yeah, it was the dumbest man I've ever met. Literally the dumbest man.
Just playing off this as well, was there anything, so in the entirety of your career, WWF, WWE, was there anything that you were brought forward to you that you just went, I just can't do that for whatever reason?
Yes. Now, I don't know how far this got written up and put in front of Vince. I tend to suspect it was just an idea being thrown around by a couple of writers. But I was presented at one point, I can't remember the girl's name. It was a girl writer there. I can't remember her name for the life of me. as soon as I walked into the arena, she says, "Hey Val, can we talk to you?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." She goes, "Okay, meet me at catering." And so I went through the bags in the locker room and I went into catering, and she was sitting there and she was like, "Would you feel comfortable doing something where I guess they were looking for um where a video would be leaked where the Val Venis character was discovered that he's not quite the ladies' man you were thinking of all the time. He's also the guy's man too." In other words, the Val Venis character has done gay porn in the past, and now there's a video that's coming to, out him as a gay porn star, right? And I said, absolutely not. No, no, not with this face. You know what I mean? It's just one of the aspects I just shut down right away. I said, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. Mm. And there's nothing against the gay community or anything. It was just this was the character that was making me money, being the ladies' man at the time. And once I'm done and retired, I know that same lady man character is what's going to make me a little bit of money after my career, doing signings and things like that.
Right, I shall move on. Because you mentioned Terry, Mitch Wotton, was there ever something more to the Terry Runnels pregnancy storyline?
No, Terry was a straight up professional. Now I've heard stories, you hear all the stories about Terry, back in the day and stuff. But when I worked with her, she was straight up professional. She was a joy to work with. Terry Reynolds was very, very professional, as was Dustin. Both of those talents were very, very professional, and fun to work with. Had a lot of fun working with them.
Yeah, there's a story, I think it's from Jim Cornette, who says that because he was still in the, I don't know if he was writing or booking as much, but he was still in the office in WWF at the time, and he said that was the one storyline more than anything else that it really ate him up because it wasn't the pregnancy, it was the miscarriage. Because it was D'Lo who knocks her off the apron, and then she suffers a miscarriage, and then they keep doing this miscarriage story for months afterwards. And Cornette's thing was, that didn't sell one ticket. Why would you do it in the first place?
Hey, that's a good point. Now that's one thing I will say about Cornette. Cornette's good at picking. I never even thought about that. That's a great point to pick out and actually identify and be able to say, hey, why this? That's a good point. Never once did I ever think about that. You got to go back to always, is that going to make money? Is that going to create value for the fans? Is it going to create value for the talent in the company? And yeah, good point. Really good point.
We shall move. I'm sorry, there's quite a lot of these questions you'll have answered before, I know. Some of them I'm going to sneak in and hopefully get some less asked questions, but a lot of people wanted to know this. Is working with Ken Shamrock like holding a tiger by the tail?
Well, no, not really. I would say, Ken Shamrock's intense. That guy's intensity is through the roof when he's in the ring. I don't know how he doesn't blow himself up sky high. But no, working with Ken, I think, we were on two separate pages a lot when it came to our in-ring work. We made it work. I mean, it was a lot of fun and stuff. Ken was great to work with, but his style was significantly different than mine. We just never really clicked like we're working as one solid unit of entertainment inside that ring. But the intensity he brought, was really what I think drew the money in that storyline. It was me doing the old, poking the bear type thing and him just exploding. And I think that's where when you have that conflict, you have the big Valboski poking the bear. Oh, I'm sleeping with your sister. And, let me introduce you to my latest video. And, just you can just see the anger getting, and the cameraman did great jobs focusing in on his face when I was introducing him to my latest video, and you just saw the anger building in his face, and then you see him just explode. And I think when he really turns it on like that, to me, that storyline, that's where the money was made. It was made in the expressions by Ken Shamrock in response to me poking the bear. That's really where the money was made. The actual matches themselves, I mean, they were decent matches, but I wouldn't have put those matches up on a pedestal. That's for sure.
I'll come back to Ken in a second. You've raised a good point. Did you ever go to the camera people or Kevin Dunn or something like that and suggest how to shoot something that you were going to do?
No. What I would do though is I would go to the cameramen sometimes and I'd say, because you got to remember that's their job. I don't know their job, and so they know their job. And so I'd go out there and talk to the camera and said, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to do X, Y, and Z over in this part of the ring. How best can you capture that? Like, where do I need to be to make this easy for you to capture?" And then the cameraman would tell me, "If you're going to do this over here, then wait for me to get over here before you go into that sequence." You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I'd say, "Hey, this is what I want to do. Where do you want me to be so you can best capture this?" Because they're going to know where I should be. For me going out there and saying, "Hey, I want you to stand there while I do something over here," I mean, the cameraman, the first thing he's going to say is, "I can capture it, but I can capture it way better if I'm standing here." And they know that's their job. They do it professionally. So I'd reverse that.
Yeah.
I'd go to them and say, "Hey, I want to do this. How can you best capture that? What do you need me to do so you can capture this in the best way possible?" And they had no issues saying, "Hey, go over to this side and, do it this way." And I would just accommodate it. Whatever they would say for me to do in front of that camera, I would do it, the way they wanted me to do it.
Yeah, they were probably flattered that you'd actually, because I don't imagine too many people would actually go and ask. And,
Yeah.
it's a creative thing to do, so it probably stirs their creative juices as well.
Absolutely. And I think when you get a team, the full team that are just all on the same page, you're bringing him on to be creative on your page that you're trying to paint. You know what I mean? And he's the brush. It's like asking the brush, "Hey, which way do you want me to stroke you, baby?" You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, that's their job. They're going to capture that. They're going to know the best ways to capture what I do in the ring. I just need to let them know what I'm going to do, and they'll figure it out.
I had Ken Shamrock a bit over a year ago, I think, interviewing in that very chair, and I told him the very same story. It was his match with you in the Valentine's Day Massacre pay-per-view. It's the one where you win the belt. And I said, "Do you remember a specific thing where Ryan Shamrock, your supposed sister, is outside and she forgets the big spot to slap him?" So Ken Shamrock's standing there really intense, and then as loud as he can, right in front of the camera, he just goes, "Slap me!" as loud as he can in the camera, and then goes, "Shh," and then he turns around and goes, it's so fantastic. Did you see that happening from the ring where he yells, "Slap me as hard as possible"?
I did not. I don't recall seeing that. Maybe I did at the time, and maybe I laughed, but I don't recall it at this time. No.
Never mind.
That's funny. That's funny.
Ryan Shamrock. Now, is she another one out of a model catalog kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where she came from. I think, if I recall correctly, I think we first met her in Houston, Texas, if I remember correct. I could be wrong about that, but I think it was Houston. And or she was out of Houston. I think she was living in Houston at the time, maybe. And but she was cool to work with. She was a lot of fun. She was easy to work with. She took instructions well. That whole thing with Ken Shamrock, that's actually news to me. I don't really recall that actually happening, but maybe it did. It was just one of those things that happens in the ring. It's just kind of a normal thing, so you don't really, log it away in the memory. It's like, oh yeah, that just happened, and oh well, Shamrock was fun to work with. Ryan Shamrock at the time, yeah, she was a lot of fun to work with.
Was it weird for you to see Ken and Ryan, the on-screen brother and sister, dating in real life?
Yeah, not gonna lie. I remember the first time I saw them together. I walked into a restaurant. I think it might have been a Perkins. I think it was either Perkins or Denny's, one of those two. I remember Tess and Nature, and I walked in there, and we see Ken Shamrock and Ryan way off in a corner all by themselves. And I don't even think they knew we were there. We kind of looked and said, "Oh, look at that. Those two are riding together." And then we just went off to our table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a little odd to see that. That's for sure.
Is it just a don't ask, don't tell? Well, all right. Just move on.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I never really brought it up to him too much after that. It was just kind of one of those things that, oh well. I remember Ken's wife at the time. And now maybe they were broken up by that point. I don't know. Maybe that's why they broke up. I don't know. But I remember his wife was he had a Latin wife, and she came to a couple of the arenas, and she was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I looked over at Ken and said, "Ken, how the hell did you score that?" But soon after that, I guess he started a relationship with Ryan Shamrock, and off to the races he was.
Well, he's clearly got something going for him to pull so many beautiful women. Very briefly, did you see the Big Show Blackman fight in the locker room?
No, I never saw the Big Show Blackman. In fact, this is the very first I'm hearing about this. I never even knew they got into a fight. I don't think I'd ever want to get anywhere near a fight with Blackman. I don't think Big Show would either.
You told the story on the last show about the airport carousel fight with Bradshaw and Steve Blackman. We will leave that there, but it's
Yes.
a fantastic story. And,
Yes.
and then I got Al Snow to tell me the exact same story, just because it's such a great story. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Before we move on very briefly, I did mention
Al, I think Al was the guy that, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it was Al that got to Blackman first, if I recall correctly. I remember somebody, as I was running over, I remember seeing somebody kind of fly with his arms open, if I remember correctly, and grab onto Blackman. I'm pretty sure that was Al. I could be wrong. You'd have to ask Al about that.
no,
I'm
I think
sure that
Al said he was. He was the one who, for some stupid reason,
grabbed
dived
him.
straight in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly, how much notice were you given before you won the Intercontinental title? Did you get before winning it?
Oh, probably a couple hours beforehand. Yeah, I had no idea. I walked out of the locker room, and Pat Patterson came up to me and he says, "Hey kid, we're gonna put the title back on you again tonight." Or you think
With Ken Shamrock, that was the first time. Yeah.
the first time. Yeah. No, that's when, no, it wasn't Pat Patterson that told me. It was Jack Lanza that told me that night. Pat Patterson was the one that was telling me I was going to win it again after my second one. It was Jack Lanza that came up to me and said, "Hey kid, we're going to put the belt on you tonight. You're going to beat Shamrock." And it was only a couple hours before I was heading out there.
Are you just, I mean, at this point, you're working most days, you're on the road a lot, and a lot of things are happening. Does the specialness of winning a belt like that get lost, or did it really hit you that you were going to be holding this belt that so many greats beforehand had held?
Yeah, the IC title was, growing up, was one of my favorite titles. It was always what I considered to be the workhorse title. You had guys like Kurt Hennig. You had so many great guys that held the IC title that could really work. And the world title was always cool because that was where, all the limelight was. That's where the money was, the limelight. But it was the IC title that I always looked at as the guys that were the workhorses of the company in terms of work rate, performance inside that ring. And so when they decided to put that title on me, man, that was an honor, man. I was like, damn, I'm part of that crew now. And yeah, that was an honor, man. I loved it. Now, after the first time I got it, it's a job. You're trying to figure ways how you can monetize this and make even more money. And, you start really trying to make that small amount of time that you're going to be carrying that title as profitable as possible. But you're kind of, with WWE, you're kind of in a cage. You're restricted of how much you can do, in terms of really pushing the envelope and making as much money as possible. I mean, you're either on their page or you're trying to push, outside of their, contrived borders, I guess you could say. And that's a difficult thing to do with WWE, to try and find other avenues to make money, because they always get shut down, is what it seemed like.
How quick was it before you got sick of having to lug the belt around through airports?
The very first time they went through my bags at security and pulled the bag out and held it up in the air, and they're going, "Oh, cool." And it's like 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm dead tired. I only got a couple hours of sleep, and I'm sitting there, "Oh, please just let me go to the plane. I just want to get on the plane." That very first time, I was, after that, every time I went through security, I said, "They're going to pull the belt out. We're going to be hung up here and be taking pictures." And you know what I mean? So the very first time that happened, every time after that, it's always like, man, are they going to drop the title tonight?
I don't think you held it long the first time either, because that was the time when I think like Road Dogg had it and then Godfather had it. Then it was going to be Owen Hart, and then sadly it didn't happen for that reason. But I think we talked about that last time as well. We will move on to the next one, and this is the one that most people I'm sure ask you a lot, as well as ask me to ask you a lot as well. And Wild Wine has asked, got to ask about the taking the big splash off the cage from Rikishi. One of the unsung crazy moments in WWE history, and I think actually it is one of the unsung crazy moments from history. It never really seems to get put into, vignettes or montages. And I remember watching that at the time thinking, Jesus, someone's got a set of balls to lie there and hope for the best. Talk me through the entire, who presents you with that idea?
So from what I can recall, and I remember it being tossed around, and at one point in time, it was suggested that I come off the top of the cage, but it just didn't seem to make much sense at all. And I know Rikishi had no issue at first. From what I understood, Rikishi had no issue coming off the cage. And to me, that made a lot more sense when I was presented with him coming off the cage. But I remember we were talking about it all. They were looking up there and going, okay, if I'm laying right here, you think, you can hit right here. I'll be right here, bro. And I think the more concerned I was, you got to remember back then in pro wrestling, I was of that mindset that it's got to look real. We got to figure out a way. And at the time, there were a lot of things in WWE that I would see happen that would man, they should have added a couple more things in between A and B, or A and D, because to go from A to D, it just didn't seem realistic. This was one of those times where there was no way to go from A to D and not make it look like it's not real, right? So, but the way we overrode that in our minds were, it may take him a long time to get up there and walk across, but the idea that that's drama, and he's going up to the top and he's walking across the top of the cage, the camera's focused, all the fans' eyes are up there, people will forget that I was just laying there doing nothing. You know what I mean? And in my mind, thinking as a wrestler, trying to make something be realistic, it's insane just to lay there. I took a bump off the top rope from the cage, hit the mat, and now I'm just laying there. But we wanted to make this moment happen, and there was no way really around that. It was going to take Rikishi time to get up that cage, to walk across. But here's where the expertise of the TV crew comes in. They kept the cameras on Rikishi. They kept it on his face. They kept the drama of him walking across that top of the cage. It was drama just watching him. Oh, you're thinking, all the fans are thinking, oh, please don't fall, please don't fall, please don't fall. And then when he finally gets to the middle and he's looking down, and then he looks up at the hard camera, all that emotion, you got to remember, all that money's right there, right? And what are the fans not doing? They're not thinking about why is Val Venis not rolling out of the way here? Why? They're not even thinking about that. It's completely out of their mind. So in this sense, the idea of me laying there for a long time was kind of inconsequential as to what it would be in real life. Obviously, I'd roll out of the way, but because the cameramen and the fans were so focused on Rikishi, they forget that I'm just laying there. And now it makes him coming off that top of that cage. And when he finally execute it, not once have I ever been asked, why didn't you roll out of the way? It's always like, hey, did that really kill you? So I think it worked out perfectly. The fans completely forgot that I was laying there for a long period of time, and it was completely focused on what Rikishi was doing. And that's the combination of the TV truck people, Kevin Dunn, and the camera crew staying focused and zoomed in on where the money's at. And where was the money at that point in time? While Rikishi's on the top of that stage, it's right there, right there on his face. And when he looked up to that hard camera right before he leaped, those cameramen zoomed right in on his face. And that's where the money is. That's the money. It was his face that made that whole episode of him coming off that cage realistic. People forget that I was laying there a long time, and it's because of what Rikishi did in combination with the camera crew.
Why did he go to the middle? Why didn't he do it from the corner like the classic Jimmy Snuka thing? Why was it so important you get to the middle in front of the hard camera?
That's a good question. I never once was asked that question. I never asked that question myself either. That's a good question. I never even thought he could have come off the corner. We could have done it that way. maybe he wanted something different than what Snuka did off the corner, because Snuka did it off the corner. Um, or maybe in Rikishi's mind, he was thinking if he could walk, that's drama. Because I know that's when I watch it back, that all that drama was on Rikishi getting up to that top and walking across that top. And that was eyes didn't turn away from the TV at that point. And that's important to remember. So maybe it was Rikishi's idea to go to the middle. I don't know. I just know Rikishi said, if you lay right there, I can hit you right from there. And I was like, okay, let's do this. You know,
I've got a theory. I've got a theory.
Shoot.
Is it because Rikishi wouldn't get as much distance jumping? So if he was in the corner, you would see him not get as much distance. Whereas if he is directly coming towards you, then the sort of depth of field is completely different. So therefore, he can more just fall off, and it still looks as spectacular in that sense.
That's a great theory. That's a possibility. Absolutely. Good thinking. Good thinking. You got to like the critical thinking going on here. Heck yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely a possibility. I never once ever considered that all these years until right now. You see this? You're stimulating the critical thinking abilities here. That's very good.
I like a bit of a mystery. I like a bit of a mystery of the theory of everything going on.
Yeah, that would be a good question to ask for Kishi next time. Why did he decide to go to the middle? You know, that's actually a good question.
Did he do the practice walk? Did he do a walk beforehand, or was this all first time?
No, was it the first? No, I think he got up there beforehand. I could be wrong, but I think he did. I think he did get up there beforehand and walk across. I think I remember seeing him up there. I could be wrong. I think he did, though.
And did it hurt?
So I can't say it hurt. He took really good care of me. It still knocked the wind out of me. You know what I mean? There was no way around that. But he took good care of me, man. I had no issues with it at all. It was he took good care of me, knocked the wind out of me, but nothing more than I've had happen before in the past. It was, you know, it is what you would expect it to be. You know what I mean? It certainly wasn't ballet, that's for sure.
No,
yeah, he took good care of me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to ask you that. I saved that till the end because you knew it was coming, but everyone wants it. We're going to move on, and in fact, I'm just going to pause 1 second. Hello, sorry, we're back. That was a very, very brief pause. Right, so we're going to be talking about a time in your wrestling life that I know you weren't that keen on. We're going to be talking about Right to Censor, but before we do, Vince Russo leaves around the beginning of October 1999, and straight after the fact you are turned into a bad guy, and then you're injected into the mix along with Mankind and The Rock for the remainder of the year in the first couple of months of 2000. Was this a leftover edict from Vince Russo to sort of keep elevating you, or did you have someone else, a new writer or a new booker or whoever it was, who was a big fan of yours that tried to elevate you?
No, I think from what I understand, it was Vince McMahon's kind of directive to write to the writers to continue writing for the character of Val Venis. That's from what I understood, anyways. And it was a collaboration of the writers that were brought in at that time. There wasn't any one specific one that would come to me with different ideas. They'd all come to me and, you know, say, hey, here's what we're going to do tonight. I'm like, okay. It wasn't like when Vince Russo was there, where Vince Russo would come to you with an idea, somewhat of a little bit of a script, but it was more of points, which was, I guess it's a lot different today. You know, I guess everything's planned out A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But back when I was there, they would give you points to hit, and they just let you put it together and hit those points on your own. But I guess today it's not like that. I guess they, you know, everything's planned out A, B, C, D. Back then, it was just a collaboration of all the writers presenting that idea with me. I think Mick was in on that too. I think he was the one really suggesting the core concepts, and then the writers, of course, doing all their little tweaking and, you know, tweaks to the Mick Foley's ideas, and then they would bring it to me and say, "Hey, here's what we're gonna do."
So Mick was a fan of yours then.
Oh yeah. Mick was fun to work with. Without, you know, Mick's a Democrat. I don't know if you know that. He's a hardcore Democrat over here in America, but he was very, very creative. He was always coming up with ideas. He was easy to work with, but he was the guy that with that Rocco Sacco connection thing. He was the one that I think was coming up with the core concepts. And then the writers were just, tweaking the edges.
Did you ever find out what happened to that sock with the Rock's face on it? Rocco. Did you ever keep it? Is it somewhere in a drawer somewhere, maybe?
No, he eventually got it back,
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah, I wanted to keep that thing and, make a little make a stand for it so you can roll it down. Have it sitting on your trophy case.
I thought you were going to say sign it and sell it, man. That would be worth thousands now, I bet.
Yeah. I bet you it would. Yeah.
You injured your neck in early 2000. I don't know what the story is. How did it happen?
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I had numbness in the tips of my fingers. My right arm was getting weaker and weaker as the months progressed. And at the time when I only had numbness in the tips of my fingers, I really didn't think much about it. I thought it was weird, but I thought it was like a pinched nerve in my elbow from hitting the splash all the time. So I just kind of chopped it up to that. But then I noticed my workouts, I'd be doing 50-pound dumbbell curls, and my left arm, I could be pumping out, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'd get to 6 with my right arm and it would just die out on me. So I'm going, what the heck's going on here? And as time went on, I saw my right arm getting smaller. And then this is after probably 3-4 months of this going on. I took a bump in the ring, which I had been bumping every night at that point with no issues. This one night I took a bump, and this is probably about 3 or 4 months after I started first initially feeling the numbness in my fingers. And when I took the bump, I landed perfectly flat, but I had this numbing, excruciating pain that just shot right down through my neck, through my shoulder, all the way down my arm. And I'd be literally in the ring frozen after I took the bump, holding my right arm going, oh my God, trying to do that with my hands, trying to get like, what the hell just happened? And the referee would, come down. He goes, you all right? I said, tell him to give me a second. And I'd roll out of the ring to the floor. And I'd be like shaking my arm going, what the heck is going on here? And then it would go away after a few seconds. So I'd roll back in the ring and continue, and I would bump and it would do it again. And it was excruciating. And it was at that point in time, I said, okay, I got to go figure out what's going on here. And I think I was on tour for another few days after that. And every time I bumped, it would do the same thing. Finally, when I got home, the first thing I did was went to the doctor, and they sent me for some x-rays, and they got me an MRI. And then they sent me to, once they got that initial, hey, here's what's happening. WWE sent me down to San Antonio, Texas with Dr. Youngblood, who was the guy that, was doing all the surgeries at the time on the WWE guys. It was Dr. Andrews out of Atlanta too, but they sent me to Dr. Youngblood in San Antonio. And so he got his own set of MRIs. And when he's looking at them, he's showing me these 2 discs in my neck that are inflamed, and they're pushing on the spinal column. He goes, so what we need to do is we need to get you in for surgery. We're going to take bone out of your hip, and we're going to take the discs out of your spine and your neck, and we're going to put the bone in there and wrap it in metal and fuse it. And at the time I knew, like a couple of the guys had already had neck fusions, right? And it wasn't a good thing at all. They were out for a whole year. And I just started getting that critical thinking going again here. And I started asking the doctor questions. How does that happen? Explain to me how my disc is inflamed. And the way he explained it to me was, you're constantly putting pressure on your spine, especially when you're taking bumps in the ring. And the discs are like sponges. And when they're open and they're loose, they absorb bodily fluids. And those bodily fluids contain vitamins, minerals, hormones that are constantly repairing microscopic damage that's done to the disc every time you move. And it's constantly repairing it, and it keeps it normal. When you're constantly pressuring those discs, it pushes all those spinal fluids or bodily fluids out of the disc, making them very dry. And because you're pushing all those fluids out of the disc, there's no hormones, vitamins, or minerals repairing the disc. So as you're taking bumps, you're causing damage, and there's nothing there to repair it. So the damage builds up over time slowly, until eventually the disc decides, I got to get bodily fluids, and it inflames trying to get bodily fluids. And when it inflames, now it's pushing on your spinal column.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about what this doctor is telling me. And the first thing that stuck in my head was the doctor just told me my disc is like a sponge. And when you squish it, if you squish a wet sponge, all the water comes out. But if you have a wet sponge crushed in your hand, and the reason for the inflammation is because there's no more bodily fluids in that sponge, and you stick your hand closed with a sponge in it into a thing of water and release it underwater, it's going to absorb all the water, right? Well, I'm thinking he just told me my disc is like a sponge. If I take the pressure off of it, it should absorb bodily fluids again. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned this to him. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical guy. I'm just taking what he's told me and putting a little critical thinking to it. And he kind of laughed at me. I said, if I do traction and I pull my spine apart and the bodily fluids come back into my disc, will it heal itself? And he laughed. He kind of goes, he goes, it's good thinking, kid, but you need to get cut. And, you're going to be out for a year. So the sooner you get started, the better. And in my mind, I'm going, okay, if I'm going to be out for a year, what's a year and 2 weeks? I'm going to try traction for 2 weeks. Just give it a shot. And I didn't really, with what the doctor told me, he's a medical guy, I really didn't have a lot of faith in that this was going to work. But I just wanted to try anything to avoid surgery. And I figured an extra 2 weeks over a year. If I'm going to be out for a year, what's an extra 2 weeks? I'm going to try it no matter what. And Vince wasn't too happy about me saying that I'm going to go home for 2 weeks and try this. So I ordered a neck traction device from eBay at the time. eBay was still relatively new then. So this was really the first thing I ever bought off eBay was a neck traction device. And so it was one where you hang over your door. It's got like a 30-pound water bottle, I think, or a water bag that hangs over the door, and it goes through 2 pulleys and then comes down, and you have a harness over your head, and you just sit in a chair and it just pulls your head off your shoulders. So I did that for 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at noon, and 30 minutes at night every day. The first 4 days, all the numbness in my fingers went away. Just like that in 4 days of doing this. And I was like, whoa, okay, there's something going on here. And I kept doing it 3 times a day. And within a month, we got to the end of the 2 weeks, and I already knew my strength was coming back in my arm because it was increasing in strength fast. And so I called Dr. Youngblood and I said, hey, I know I'm supposed to come out there tomorrow and sit down with you, but I don't know. I got no more numbness in my fingers. My strength is coming back, and it's only 2 weeks. I've been doing this 3 times a day. I'd like to keep doing this. And I remember the office calling me after I talked to the doctor and saying, you need to go out there and get the surgery done. And I said, I'm not doing it. I'm getting better. And Dr. Youngblood tried to say, it may get better, but the first bump you take is going to wreck it all again. Mm-hmm. But I didn't care at that point. I knew it was getting better, and I just stayed the course. And 6 months later, I got clearance from Dr. Youngblood. I remember I called the office and I said, I got my full strength back. I'm taking bumps in the ring here in Arizona. I'm not feeling any of that shooting pain. I think I'm ready to go. And they said, we got to send you back to Youngblood to get cleared. So I went back to Youngblood, and he took more of the MRIs. And I remember him putting those MRIs up in the light boxes, and he's got his arms crossed and his hand on his chin and his glasses, and he's looking at all the MRIs. And I'm sitting there watching him look at all these MRIs after 6 months of doing this traction every day, 3 times a day. And he's looking at all the MRIs, and he turns around to me and he goes, you dodged a bullet, kid. He goes, I don't know how this happened, but this is a totally normal spine. And it was done just through traction, and it worked really, really well. And I still to this day, that was, that was I still wrestled a lot of years after that full time. And to this day, I have no issues. And I still do traction, maybe 2-3 times a month. I don't do it 3 times a day like I did it, but I still do it 2-3 times a month. Mm. Yeah. So this idea that your body can't heal itself if you give it the right, nutrients and the right, I was pulling my spine apart for, 20, sometimes 30 minutes a day, and really letting those discs absorb that bodily fluid. And it worked. There's nothing else I can say about it. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training at all. All I know is what the doctor told me happened. And I figured if I did the reverse, maybe it'll fix itself. And it did. And there's not, I don't know what else to say about it. You know, the doctor turned around and he says, "You dodged a bullet, kid." He says, "I don't know what to make of this."
Do you know? Do you know that story is very similar to the one that Dallas Page says, because I think he was supposed to be getting back surgery. They kept saying you've got to be cut open, and he decided to go down the yoga route. And basically,
is that why he went into yoga? Was through a back issue?
Yeah, that's exactly. And they kept saying he needed the surgery, and it was the same thing as you. It's like, not everything. I mean, things can be cured with surgery, but it's not the only route to take. In certain cases, you can treat your body very, very well and let it recover itself. And sometimes, I'm not a medical expert, but sometimes that's the better way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I did it. You know, I really, when after that very first meeting with the doctor, I didn't have a whole lot of faith that it would work, because you have a medically trained doctor telling me, "Oh, it's cool thinking, kid, but you need to get cut," and you put all your trust in them. But in my mind, I was like, well, something's not making sense. He just told me the disc is like a sponge, and when you push all the bodily fluids out of it, it pushes all the healing nutrients, the hormones, the vitamins, the minerals out of it. And then in my mind, well, if the nutrients aren't in the disc, well, obviously it can't heal it. But if they are back in the disc, wouldn't it do what they're supposed to do? And that's heal the disc. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get that out of my head. So I just decided to give it a try. And, 4 days after doing that, 3 times a day, 4 days of doing that, and all the numbness went out of my fingers, then I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this and see where it goes. And sure enough, it worked. And not only did it work spectacularly well. You know what I mean? It was amazing, and I'm still amazed by it.
We are going to move on. This is a question from me again, and it's something that I'm very interested to ask you, because you were directly affected as much as anyone else in this. So SmackDown debuts August 1999 and almost immediately attracts the attention of L. Brent Bozell and the PTC, because WWF is now on network television and is the parent television council, I believe. They now started focusing in on network TV shows that had too much what they considered not safe for kids content, essentially. Did you have any run-ins from like religious groups or conservative groups for your Val Venis character before SmackDown debuted? Were anyone trying to pick at you or anything like that?
No, I never had any issues with that myself personally. I do remember getting to the arena a few times, and some of the staff at the WWE would come up and say, "Hey, did you know that they're picketing on the corner of the building?" I guess, people would come out there, but it was always a small group of people. It was maybe like 20, 30 people, holding signs up and saying, "Oh, this is immoral," and, all that stuff. But I never saw them. I just heard that there was a few times at a few of the arenas that they were picketing. I think more their power to get advertisers to pull from WWE was basically relegated to, and I shouldn't say relegated because it was a much more powerful platform, but to network news. Fox News was one of them, CNN, MSNBC, all those big news networks were hosting that. What was his name? Brazell?
L. Brent Bozell.
Yeah, Brent Bozell, that was him. Yeah, PTC leader, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and yeah, he was all over the network news at the time. And I remember Vince being concerned about it because they were putting pressure on advertisers. And if I remember correctly, they had, I think it was Coca-Cola, pull out of advertising on WWE programming. And we walked into the arena the following week, and instead of having Diet Cokes in the coolers, it was all like Diet Pepsis. Yeah. A little bit different there.
When did you realize that you were sort of getting in the crosshairs, along with The Godfather, let's say, as well? Or then there's like Mark Henry was doing some stuff where he was saying he was sleeping with his sister or something crazy. But when did you start realizing that this might affect your character?
I think once I found out that advertisers were being pressured by the PTC, it's all about the value that you're creating and what you're going to tokenize that value into. And if Coca-Cola is saying we don't want to be associated with that kind of value, then you start thinking, okay, if money is pulling out of the product, that can't be a good thing for anybody. You know what I mean? And I know Vince was concerned about it because he had talked to me about it. He literally sat me down and said, these guys are. This is when he was first introducing the RTC, idea to me to join the RTC. He goes, these guys have caused us a lot of problems. They've had Coca-Cola pull out some of our advertisers. So we'd like you to, go in there. And he's basically mocking the PTC with the RTC. And so I understood that, some of what he created the RTC for was to mock his enemy, somebody that he considered his enemy, which was the PTC at the time. And so I understood that this was more of a defense mechanism, I guess, creating the RTC as part of the show in order to mock something that's really happening in real life. And that's that PTC going after our advertisers. And I think it did well. I think the way he mocked them was pretty good. It seemed effective because it seemed like once we really got on TV and they were pushing the censorship that we were trying to push on our own show, it kind of took the steam away from the PTC. And eventually they just kind of faded away. They stopped getting interviews on Fox News, for example, and CNN. And it just seemed like they kind of faded away as we made more and more fun of them, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. So, as you say, Vince McMahon explains to you why the RTC is coming into existence. And obviously because you, or at least you were one of the most risque characters, but in the last few months, around the Rikishi time, in fact, when he gave the splash, you turned up, I think you turned back like a really conservative look. You were in short trunks. Not that you went with Val Venis, and then you had very short hair, which I cannot believe you cut your hair and you didn't get your head shaved in the ring. And you just
right.
So why did you cut your hair and not like make it into a storyline?
At that point in time, I've been wrestling a lot of years at that point. I've been wrestling in Japan and Mexico and in Puerto Rico before that, and I had long hair my whole career. By the time I got to Japan, I was sick of my long hair, sick of it. And I was debating cutting it, but back then it was still part of my character. And I said, just keep it. I was just tired of it. And even when I first went into WWE, I went there with my long hair. And that was what they built the character kind of around, was the character's got long hair. You came in with long hair. And it wasn't long after, the first, I guess, year, 2 years there, I kind of just dealt with it. But then there was a period of time where the hair got to the longest it ever was. And I was breathing hard in the ring and my hair swung around and I was breathing in my mouth and my hair got sucked down right down my throat.
Oh.
And it was all sweaty and nasty. And I literally, this was live on Raw. And I literally stopped in the ring, grabbed my hair and pulled it. And I could feel it. I could feel it coming up out of my throat. I'm like, wow. And then I just went back into the match. And that was the night after I got back to the locker room. I said, this shit's got to come off. And from that day forward, I was asking Vince, every TV, Vince, can I please cut my hair? Please let me get rid of this. It's interfering with what I do in the ring now. Now, obviously, I could work around it if I wanted to, but I was so sick of it at that point. I was making up any excuse I could to get Vince to agree to let me cut my hair. And it took me, it was about another 3 months of asking him at every TV before finally he said, go ahead and cut it.
Oh, so you did actually have to ask permission then?
Yeah. You had to, I mean, even with if you wanted to get a tattoo, you had to ask permission back then. Now, oh yeah. One of the guys I might have been Randy Orton. Maybe not. It might have been somebody else, but I think it was Randy when he was still a young guy. He went and got a tattoo. And the office got pissed about it and made a note about it at the talent meeting. If you decide to get any tattoos, you have to have it approved by the office, and it was the same thing with getting your hair cut. Don't show up at TV drastically changing your character without letting anybody else know and getting approval for is basically how it goes around over there.
Isn't it funny how you're an independent contractor, yet you need approval to get a haircut?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can kind of see it in the way that, okay, this is the character we're developing for you. This character is part of the contract, and this is the character we're investing in. If you make any changes to that, you need to have it approved by us because we're not necessarily approving putting that version of this character on TV. We've approved putting this character version on TV. You know what I mean? It's a business. You got to be able to communicate and work out deals. Nothing's off the table though. With WWE, one thing I found, a lot of guys will say, "Oh no, WWE's rigid in their rules and in how they operate." And while that may be kind of true, WWE's about making money. They're definitely not against ideas being thrown at them, even if they're crappy ideas, because they can, if a crappy idea is thrown at them, but they see, a shining little pebble in that crappy idea, they can extract that shiny pebble and make money with it. So they're not against having ideas thrown at them and negotiating and talking and communicating to make money and make the product better. But a lot of guys will probably tell you a different opinion. They'll probably tell you, no, it's what they say or it's the highway. And I never found that to be true. I found they're pretty good at negotiating different routes to get to point B where everybody wants to get to. You know what I mean?
As we were talking before, we were talking about the PTC and then the RTC, the right to censor. This is going to be a bit more of a catch-all sort of question, but the only thing I know that you've said previously is that you hated wearing the shirt and you hated wearing the trousers because they just clung to you, and almost like the hair, I suppose, if it gets in your throat, and it's sort of the same thing. But as far as the RTC thing goes, ultimately, what did you make of all of it? Do you think it was a boon to your career? Was it just a stopgap till you did your old thing again? What did you think of it?
Well, would I have rather to continue with the Val Venis character? Absolutely. I think at the time it was what I would consider a decent little break from the Val Venis character. It kind of made sense with all that was going on in real life with the PTC, but it definitely wasn't the favorite time of mine in WWE for sure, and mainly because it was very uncomfortable. When I'm in that ring and I'm grinding, I'm sweating, and I'm not gonna lie, I dreaded putting those clothes on every night in the locker room and knowing that I was going to come back, and even taking sweaty clothes off that's clinging to your skin. I mean, it became kind of a ritual, but it wasn't an enjoyable ritual at all. You know what I mean? It was a headache. It was a headache. You get through it because you're getting paid to, do that RTC character, and you get through it, but it wasn't a fun time. That's for sure. That's for sure. The only thing that made it really fun was the fact that I was there with Godfather.
That's just, did he like it, or did he really hate it?
I think he really hated it. I don't think he liked RTC too much at all. It was, Godfather likes to have fun, man. He likes to get out there and just goof around and, do the Godfather. To him, in my view, that Godfather gimmick was him amplified, and he just went out there and had fun. And I had fun with Godfather no matter what character whether he was doing RTC or whether he was doing the Godfather. But I'll tell you this, just from my personal experience, when he was the Godfather, that was the most fun. I'll tell you a story about do you remember when Godfather and I were Supply and Demand for a short period of time? Do you remember that tag team? Very briefly, we were Supply and Demand, yeah. And so we were on the road, and we were going from city to city, and there are times where the cities kind of melt together. Your whole tour, you forget what city you're in sometimes, right? Well, now at the time, I was using marijuana back then very minimally, socially. After a show, instead of going, because I didn't drink, so instead of going while the rest of the guys would go and drink a beer, I would smoke a joint. But I'd do it, once in a blue moon at that time. I never used it medicinally back then. And but Godfather would use it 24/7. And so we had left Cleveland from a show that night, and we were in Philadelphia. The worst place to mess up in is Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And here's really where Godfather, this proves that he's a different breed of wrestler. Okay. Because when you mess up in Philadelphia, if you mess anything up in that match, you'll have all of the fans in unison screaming, "You effed up," pretty much the rest of your match. You're not getting away from it, right? Well, Godfather and I, the night before we're in Cleveland, now we're in Philadelphia. We walk to the ring as, the tag team Supply and Demand. I cut my promo, "Hello, ladies." He takes a microphone, and he'll always start off with, "What's up?" whatever town he's in, right? And then he'd wind it up with roll of fatty for this pimp daddy. Well, we're in Philly, and I'm standing in the corner now after cutting my promo. He grabs the microphone. I got my arms up on the ropes in the corner, and he walks to the middle of the ring. Godfather does. And in Philadelphia, and we're baby faces here, he goes, "What's up, Cleveland?" And the cheers instantaneously turned to boos. And the way Godfather reacted, because he didn't expect that, right? He goes, and he's looking around, wondering what happened. And then he's like, huh. And then he turns to me. I mean, turns to me like nothing happened. And he looks right at me. He goes, "Hey, Val, what city are we in?" And I'm in the corner. I go, "We're in Philadelphia, brother." And he grabs the microphone, goes back to the middle of the ring, goes, "I'm just playing with y'all. What's up, Philadelphia?" And then the entire arena busts out laughing. And instead of "you effed up," it's "you are high." You are high. It was so funny. It was working with Godfather was the funnest time. I had so much fun with him. Great dude. Great dude.
Dude, so a proper Spinal Tap moment then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. that was the funniest thing. Right in the middle. "Hey, Val, what city are we in?" That's tremendous.
We before I forget, someone actually wrote in, Chris Agnew. He wanted to know, why did you wear white trousers when everyone else wore black?
I think because everyone else was wearing black.
Simple
I
as
decided
that.
to go in the other direction. Simple as that. I just wanted to do something different. Um, Looking back on that, it was I don't know. I'm kind of on one side of me, I really liked going in that direction. And the other side of me was like, man, that just makes me look like Rick Martel. Wait, I don't know if you remember the one time, it's still in my head when Rick Martel came out with all white trunks and all white boots and all white pads. And when I saw myself all dressed in white like that, that was the first thing that popped into my head, like was the Rick Martel deal. And I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was me. It wasn't my character. So it was short-lived, the white trunks and the white boots.
So another question then, and Zakat, I can't even read his damn name. Bizarre World, something or other. How was it working with Jerry the King Lawler, and why was the cat really fired?
Ooh. Well, Jerry the King Lawler, I mean, he was always easy to work with. I had no issues with King. He's a professional. I felt like I was on autopilot working with King. You don't really have to even think. He just does all the thinking, and things just fall into place when you're working with him. He's just that good in the ring. Why was Cat really fired? That's a good question. I've heard tons of different stories. But I don't know which story's real. I don't know, exactly why she got canned. I've heard some, pretty wild stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know what the real issue was. I don't know if it had something to do with what was his name? Meat. Remember Meat?
Sean Stasiak. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that I've heard a story that he had something to do with it, or he was involved with Cat at some point. I don't know what the whole story was. I don't know. But yeah, with King was easy to work. It was like a night off when you see your name next to the King. At first I was kind of like, "Oh, this is cool. We're going to be able to do all this great stuff." But no, King goes on autopilot, and it's very easy to work with him. It's that's just his experience. That just you literally ride on his experience train is what you do. It's an easy night when you're in there with the King.
Man, I want more stories about the cat. But these are all just rumors, aren't they?
Yeah, that's the thing is I can't clarify. These are just stories I've heard. Like I've heard that the one main story was between Cat and Sean Stasiak. But how true is it? I don't know. I've never asked Sean if it was true. I never really kind of butted into any of those types of relationships and found out what was true and what was not. I just kind of let the rumors flow around, and it is what it is.
Just enjoy him.
Just enjoy him, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go now to WWE and the Big Val Boski and Chief Morley. If we get through enough questions, then we've got enough time. We'll do the little game at the end of this show. But if we don't, we don't, because there's so many questions are left out. There's a part 3 and a part 4 here, I'm sure. I'm not even going to attempt this guy's name. The surname Delgado. My question for Val Venis: when the WWE did the first brand split in 2002, did he see himself getting a bigger push? And if so, who was someone he wanted to work a program with but didn't get to?
Well, after they did the brand split, I was kind of left hanging. Wonder. I was in a spot where I was wondering, where am I going from here? I didn't know. It was and that's kind of an uneasy feeling when you're a wrestler and you're under contract. You kind of, there was a lot of shuffling around at that point in time. But I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to work the top guys back at the time, but it seemed like every time I was throwing it out there, um, they'd always come with another storyline, and there were a lot of very short one-offs, I guess, that they would come to me with. But as far as working, like I wanted to do it was a time when I really, really was pushing hard to do something with Ric Flair. And there was a couple of weeks where the writers kept adding on to the storyline, and it seemed like I was going to do something with Ric Flair. I said, okay, this is going to go. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go into an angle with Ric Flair. And then a few weeks would go by and I'd walk into the arena and the Ric Flair ideas are completely thrown in the trash. And you're kind of that's deflating when you see the writers putting all this stuff together and a couple of weeks is going by and they keep adding to it every week. And, a couple more weeks goes by. And then the next thing you know, oh no, we decided to go in a different direction. And that all that planning is just gone. And it's deflating. It deflates you. It's very disappointing, that's for sure. And that happened a few times in WWE.
With the Ric Flair thing, what was the storyline going to be?
They were my old tag team partner, Shane Sewell. I don't know if you're familiar with Shane Sewell.
Yeah, were you the Glamour Boys or something? Was it in Puerto Rico?
Boys,
yeah.
Yeah, in Puerto Rico. And, he was a huge star in Puerto Rico. And then, I guess he did something with Impact Wrestling, TNA, I guess it was at the time. And Booker T did something with him and Booker T, and they wanted him to wrestle. But by that point, he had been wrestling for so many years and he was banged up and he just wanted to be a referee. And I guess when he was in TNA, they kept trying to push him to wrestle. And then finally they convinced him to do a match with, I think it was Booker T, and it was just supposed to be a one-off and he was supposed to go back to reffing. And then I guess they kept trying to push him to wrestle and he ended up leaving anyway, because he just didn't want to wrestle anymore. But at one point they were going to bring Shane in as Ric Flair's illegitimate child. And because he looks, I mean, if you watch Shane Sewell wrestle, it's not like he tries to be, he's just himself, but his mannerisms, his look, his hair, the way he wrestles, the way he cuts promos, you could easily say that this guy was Ric Flair's son. I mean, he was far more like Ric Flair, or Ric Flair like, than Ric Flair's own sons were. And this was almost identical. And what a great worker he was. And so they were pushing the idea that, from what I understood, at some point in time, Flair was going to be cutting a promo in the ring. This is what I was presented for, all this to happen. And this blonde guy was going to come out of the blue running down the ramp, and he was going to start teeing off on Flair, and then, clothesline Flair over the top rope, and nobody knows who this guy is. But when the idea was Flair was going to land on the outside with Shane in the ring, looking, over the ropes down at Flair, and the look on Flair's face was supposed to tell the story that nobody knows who this kid is, but you can clearly see Ric Flair knows who this kid is. And the idea was, Ric Flair had an illegitimate child in Puerto Rico back in his day. Shane was the guy that was he never got child support. He never got it, and they were going to do the whole, illegitimate Ric Flair child thing. And this went on. I mean, they kept presenting this character to me. And then of course I was going to come in, and once they get into an angle, I was supposed to come in and, help Shane win the match and eventually move into an angle with Flair with their angle. Because Ric Flair left Shane to be raised in Puerto Rico with no child support, none of this. And now, Shane's coming back to take a spot that he thinks his dad doesn't belong.
Mm.
And from what I understand, and I don't know the whole truth, that storyline was being built up, then was presented to Rick, and Rick said he couldn't do that to his own sons, his own real sons. And
Really?
the whole thing got canned. That's what I was told. So yeah, it's that's the one guy I wanted to really move into an angle with. And when they presented Shane as the illegitimate child, and then they would go into a storyline, and eventually I would be the heavy that would come out because I was Shane's tag team partner back in the day. You know what I mean? I'd help him, and we'd all go into a big storyline together. But from what I understood, it got crushed by Rick himself. He said he couldn't do that to his own sons.
Man, were you to have been revealed as like a nephew at some point down the line, or were you just purely just brought in as Shane's old tag partner, do you think?
Just Shane's old tag partner. I knew his story down there, that his father left him, and, just left him to be raised in Puerto Rico without ever paying a dime in child support. You know what I mean? And I helped polish Shane to become the man he is today. And you know what I mean? Like it was, to me, it sounded like an incredible storyline. But from what I understand, what I was told by the writers was Rick considered it, contemplated it, and then ultimately shut it down.
Do you know that's going to, I promise you, that will blow some people's minds. That will blow a lot of people's minds watching it, because I didn't realize it was like such a fleshed out. I'd never heard that before, and that it was so fleshed out and then cancelled at the last minute as well. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember, I guess they got in the story. The writers were in contact with Shane, and I guess he wasn't even under contract. They were only considering bringing him up and putting him under contract in order to start the storyline. And all they needed was for Flair to say, let's do it. And they were going to sign him, and they were going to go into it. From what I understand, that's where it all ended right there. That's everything kind of collapsed right there. And I came into the arena, and they just basically flat out said, we're going in a different direction. And that was the last time I ever heard of that storyline.
Man, that is a shame. That I suspect that would have been good as well. We will move on.
Yeah, and Shane is so, I don't know if you've ever seen any of his matches or any of his work.
No, not really.
Absolutely. I'm probably one of the best talent in the world, and one of the best undiscovered talents in the world. He was amazing. He was amazing promo wise, wrestling wise. He was absolutely amazing. That angle in my mind would have been absolutely tremendous, both for Rick himself and for Shane. But yeah, it just like that out of the blue, just walked into the arena one day, and the writers were like, nah, we're going in a different direction.
Speaking of going into a different direction, I haven't got my glasses on, Sean, I'm telling you. Hakima Josh has asked, did you enjoy the Chief Morley character because it was good for business during Bischoff's stint as GM? You both had good chemistry. And how much legit heat did Eric Bischoff have coming into the company?
Well, with Eric, when I was put in that Chief Morley position, I was kind of expecting it to parlay into, okay, this is our way of getting away from the former porn star character and into a more serious character. And which I liked on one hand, if it's bringing out more of my natural personality, because I'm a pretty serious guy when it comes to different issues. So it was more of getting away from what I would consider to be solely entertainment. Let's face it, the Val Venis character wasn't serious about anything. That was just straight up entertainment.
Well, he was serious about one thing.
Let's
not put him down.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Good point. But it was one of those things where I felt it was an avenue to get away from that Val Venis character, yet still be relevant, still be in the game, and maybe after that stint move into a direction where I can get into the world championship, title contention. But it seemed like once I became Chief Morley, it wasn't. Remember when I said earlier that before I would get points of what to hit, and I'd go out there and cut promos and just make sure I hit those points. Now, with all these new writers that were coming in at the time, there was no points. It was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're memorizing all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, okay, it just felt like there's a little bit of a disconnect because there's none of me in this. This is all what I'm saying is what the writers' minds are thinking. This isn't any of me. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And so it just felt like there was something off to it. It was more of a uneasiness to playing that character. I mean, the character I loved, it was the verbiage that came out of my mouth. It just didn't feel natural. It didn't feel authentic. It might have felt authentic to the guy that wrote it that's standing behind the camera and going, yeah, this is great. But in my mind, I'm like, I just really wouldn't say this stuff. I would spin it and say it like this, which was way different than what I was actually saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you ever get to a point where you just like forget what's been written? I'm just going to say it in my own words. Did you ever do that, or were you always good with memorizing the script?
I was pretty good with memorizing the scripts. I just didn't like it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It was, I love just give me the points, tell me how much time I need. I'll go out and I'll hit these points in that time. And it was a lot more natural. I don't know why. It just felt easy when I had points to hit and I would go out and hit them. But when it came to memorizing the lines, like the full lines, the point thing was gone. Um, it took away the authenticity of what was being communicated. It was I'm trying to take the words that came out of a writer's mind and word for word make it feel like it's coming out of my mind. And it felt uncomfortable doing that.
Mm.
I could do it, but it goes back to, hey, if you don't feel comfortable with this, people might be able to see through that. And that was a worry that was always in my head. Are people going to be able to see through how I'm verbalizing this? Because this isn't something I would normally say. Can people see that? Do you know what I mean? That was always a question I had. And when you're thinking about that, you're not thinking about the performance. You know what I mean? You're not thinking about making this thing the best way you possibly can, make it the best product you possibly can. You're thinking about, can they see through this, me memorizing? It's different. It's different. And I didn't feel comfortable doing it.
Did Eric Bischoff have nuclear heat when he came into the WWE? Because you were with Raw. Were you at Raw at the time when the brand split happens and then Eric Bischoff turns up?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think I was with Raw at the time. Yeah. I didn't see any nuclear heat there. I think it was more shocking. It wasn't unexpected, so to speak, because when Vince, I mean, Vince is a businessman. He doesn't care about, especially competitive heat. He's a competitor. So if you're competing against him like Bischoff was, I think he's got a respect for that. But at the same time, you're not necessarily his enemy, you're his competitor. But he can see his competitors are out there to make money too. He saw Bischoff was trying to make money and Vince is trying to make money. So when, of course, you got one winner there, you got Vince taking over WCW, but Vince doesn't ever forget the fact that what Bischoff did was pretty amazing. There's money there. Mm-hmm. And if there's money there, let's bring him in. Let's do business. And so it wasn't unexpected when you know who Vince is, but it was still shocking to see. It's shocking when you see, Bischoff come walking into a WWE arena for the very first time. It's shocking, but completely unexpected. Or no, I'm sorry, not unexpected.
I've got so many questions. I'm really trying to figure out what to ask you next because I'm just thinking, what are the best ones? Because I've got 4 pages left for you. It's ridiculous. So I'm really trying my best to pick out the best ones. This might be a very quick no. One of my very first guests, Nick Dinsmore, Eugene, he started telling a story about Big Viscera in the Philippines. And then he said, I can't tell that story. And I've been trying to find out what that story is for about 2 years since. Any chance you know what the story is with Viscera in the Philippines?
No, I do not. I can only guess though, but I have no idea. I've never heard, any kind of story between Viscera and Eugene in the Philippines. I do know in the Philippines there was a bathhouse and a massage parlor that I guess when we were at the arena, there was somebody coming around dropping cards off all out in the back of the arena there for the boys. Hey, come to our bathhouse, and they were just laying cards everywhere. And so maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. I went back to the hotel and smoked some fine ganja that night. I remember that. Found some really good Filipino ganja and just enjoyed that for the evening.
I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna tell you a story one sec. Sorry, everybody. I had to tell that story. I'm recording again now.
All right.
So I'll leave it with Viscera because I will ask this because you might have a good story here. Have you got any good stories of witnessing wrestlers caught?
Yeah, we went through a couple of wrestlers court. One of them was with Christian and Edge, and
Really?
that was an interesting one. It had something to do with presenting the writers with comic books that they liked and all these gifts, I guess, they were given to the writers to try and get the writers to write for them. And I guess at the time, the writers were writing the storylines where the Edge and Christian were doing the posing, 10 seconds of posing or whatever it was. Remember, they were wearing the hoser hats and straight up hosers, right? Canadian hosers, right? And I guess the writers, from what I understood, the writers were putting a lot of time writing for them because they were being gifted. They were being gifted like comic books that were like important to the writers and all this other stuff. This is the story that I heard anyway. So they had a big wrestlers court over it, which actually turned into just entertainment for the boys, really. Because the judge, as Christian and Edge, in some aspects, I guess you could say, bribed the writers to write for them, from what I understand. Well, they came into court prepared and they bribed the judge with whiskey.
Who's the judge? Dare I ask?
The judge, of course, was Undertaker. And so it turned into it was a big, it was entertainment for the boys, basically, is what it was. And I think the heat was mainly on the writers themselves. From what I recall, it wasn't necessarily Christian and Edge that were being put on trial here. It was the writer for accepting the bribes. This is what I understand anyways. And I guess, yeah, it was fun to watch. The highlight of the point was, Undertaker being bribed with the bottle of whiskey. And yeah, it was interesting to watch for sure. We had another one where I was the prosecutor. To me, it was kind of, I don't know, it has, if I remember correctly, it had something to do with something the females did in a match or be backstage. I can't remember exactly how it went down, but it was a boring court. That one was just a quick in and out type thing. I think the funnest one was the Edge and Christian and the storyline writers that were brought before wrestlers court for sure.
So we know that Undertaker was always the judge. Was there ever like a backup judge if Undertaker wasn't available?
Not that I remember. I think pretty much Undertaker was the judge. And yeah, I don't remember anyone else even being talked about being a judge. I was a prosecutor in one of them. Yeah. But yeah, wrestlers court's a different beast, that's for sure. But that was probably the one with Edge and Christian and the writers. That was the one that really stands out to me.
I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to go to the main event, just because I want to ask you about this. We're skipping, as I keep saying, we're skipping tons of this stuff out, and I'm sure there's a part 3 if you're up for it. TNA,
absolutely.
You leave WWE, and then you do some tours for New Japan, as well as the Australian Hulkamania tour. I don't think you were actually in a match with Hulk or Rick, were you? They were just working with each other.
Yeah, they were just working with each other on that tour. I was working. What did I work? Ken Anderson over there. It was in about the middle of the card. The middle of the card.
So how did you come to? Was it just like good timing that you end up on this tour? And
yeah, I think it was Eric Bischoff that had called me at first and said, "Hey, do you want to do this tour?" And it just got set up from there. And the next thing you know, I'm flying over to Australia. Probably one of the funnest tours I've ever been on. It was an incredibly fun tour. Hung out with Godfather most of the time over there. And yeah, that was a fun tour. It was what we have. I think we were over there for what, 2-3 weeks, something like that. And 6 matches. And it was fun. It was fun. We had a lot of downtime and it was a lot of fun hanging out with the guys there. And tell you what, every city in Australia, Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, every big city, I know the hobbyist cannabis growers.
Oh, really?
And they always hooked me up. Every city I went to, I was hooked up and dialed in.
What's the best? Okay, so where it's somewhere illegal or band or whatever it is, how's the best way to get weed? If someone doesn't offer it to you, how's the best way of getting weed?
You know, getting weed off the black market can be it's, I mean, in general, you're probably going to be okay, but I mean, it's not the safest way to do it. Luckily, you know, I've been passionate about cannabis for a lot of years. So I've been in the forums where hobbyist growers from all over the world in countries where it's completely illegal. You have hobbyist growers that are just there. They want to grow the best cannabis in their closet that they possibly can. They're looking for the best tips, the best tools. So you know, over the years, I've developed kind of a friendship with these hobbyist growers all over the world, including there in England as well. And you know, they're always saying, "Hey, man, I got these seeds from Greenhouse Seed Company in Amsterdam. You know, should I grow this particular strain hydroponically? Should I grow it organically?" You know, it's just a bunch of guys that are passionate about growing really good quality cannabis. So when I got booked on that Australian tour, the first place I went to was in the forums where I knew I had a whole bunch of guys from Australia that were constantly asking questions about how to grow better weed. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Hey guys, man, I'm coming to Australia on these dates. I'd love to meet you guys. Try some of your homegrown." And they came out of the woodwork, man. They were like, "Bro, as soon as you land, I'll have you announce my finest stuff." And sure enough, the stuff, I mean, you got to remember, these are hobbyist growers that have been doing it for a long time. Even though it's illegal, they do it, you know, really discreetly. And so, yeah, Godfather and I, we were hooked up from the time we landed to the time we left. We went to one of the guys' house, and or at least I did. I went there by myself, actually, because it was early in the morning. And he wanted to take me to show me his grow room. And he actually turned one of the rooms in his house into a full grow room. All the lights and everything were all professional. And this guy has been doing it for years, just growing for him and his friends, you know. He was a software developer, real wealthy guy too. And just getting to meet people while I'm wrestling all over the world that are also passionate about cannabis that you never would have met before. You never would have been able to try their homegrown cannabis. That's a lot of fun. It makes your trips a lot better. Let me tell you, makes these, no matter where, if I go to England, I go to Australia, I go to Spain, France, I'm hooked up. I am set up and dialed in.
Good man. Good man. So you'll have to tell me where these forums are.
There you go. Heck yeah.
What's Hulk Hogan like to hang around with socially?
You know, I only hung out with him a few times, and it was mainly in the bars in the lobby, you know, or at catering at the arena while we're eating. But he was always cool. I mean, he's a different cat. He's into feeling energies and things like that, which I don't know what all that's about. You know, he'd always say, "You got a good energy to you." Okay, I'm assuming he's just saying that's, you know, hey, you feel like you're a good dude. You know, I'm assuming that's another way of saying that. But he's into all these different energies, things that I just didn't get, and he spoke a lot about. But yeah, you know, he was a good dude. He was just a good guy to have a conversation with, you know. And Godfather and I were sitting next to him one night, and he was just sitting there tipping back the drinks one after another. And Godfather and I, we had a big doobie rolled up. We're ready to go outside and smoke this thing. And Hogan's just going and going and going and going. And finally, Godfather just kind of nudges me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, "Oh, let's go. Let's go. We'll be back, guys." You know, and we get up and get out of there and go smoke the doobie and then come back and listen to him ramble a little longer. But it was always about the different energies of different people. You know what I mean? Is what he would talk about a lot.
I thought Hogan partook. I thought he would have gone out there with you.
He didn't with us. He didn't with us. Maybe he does now. Maybe he did then. And he just didn't know. We didn't tell him we had a doobie on us. You know what I mean? We just, hey, maybe we want to go out and smoke this. Let's go. We were basically trying to get away from the conversation because we go smoke this thing. You know. I will tell you a story about knobs though.
Oh,
you want to hear this story?
Please.
Got a great story about knobs. So this was how's that? Is that good?
Yeah, it's great.
Right there. All right. So this one night we're in Australia, and so Godfather and I, we get back to the hotel, and it's probably about, I don't know, it's probably about 10 at night at that point. So we go upstairs and we're rolling these big fat doobie. I mean, a big fat one. This one is probably holding about, I'm guessing, maybe 3-4 grams of bud in it. It's a big fat doobie. And by the time we got done rolling it, it's probably about 11 o'clock at night. We come down the elevator and we walk into the lobby. And as our goal is to walk through the lobby, out the front doors, and across the street. And across the street, there's this old stone train track bridge with an atrium underneath it. It's a really cool stone atrium where there's stone benches. You can go in that atrium and just sit on the bench, right? It's like a stone park bench underneath a stone train bridge. It's pretty cool. And so Godfather and I, our goal was to go across the street into that atrium at 11 o'clock at night and just down this doobie, right? And as we're walking through the lobby, the Knobs comes running out of the bar and he's like, "Hey, where are you guys going?" So I have the doobie in my hand, this big fat doobie. I have it wide open in my hand and I pick it up. And I'm going, "We're going across the street to smoke this doobie." And he goes, "You mind if I join you?" And I look at Godfather and he goes, "Maybe it'll quiet him down." So I said, "All right, come on." So we go across the street to the atrium and, we light this sucker up and we're puff passing. And Knobs, who's already loud to begin with, is getting louder and he's getting louder and louder. It seems like every time he takes a puff, he's getting louder. So I look over at Godfather and Godfather just shakes his head and goes, "Some guys are just wired differently, brother." It's like, damn, man. So I'm still smoking this dude. We were passing around, finally get done it, baked out of our minds. So Godfather and I, we're going to head back and go back up to our rooms and we're going to crash out for the night, right? We're not really going to hang out at the bar with the rest of the guys. Those guys were just getting into the alcohol and stuff, right? So we walk back into the lobby. And as we're walking through the lobby, you see Sags come running out of the bar and throws his arms around all three of us. His eyes are like just geeked open. He's like, "Oh man, he threw so much stuff on the bar, so much was right up my nose." Oh. Knobs, without any hesitation, throws his arm around Sags and goes, "What are we waiting for?" And they go right into the bar. And Godfather and I, we just beeline it to the elevator. But as we beeline it to the elevator, there's, fans coming up. "Hey, can you sign this? Can you sign?" So we're signing things. Well, now Knobs, who's geeked now, he comes out of the bar. And as we're finally getting into the elevator, Knobs comes in there with us. And we go up, maybe I'm just guessing 2-3 floors, and it stops. Now we're up, all three of us are up near the top of the hotel. And it stops about third, maybe fourth floor. And the door opens up. And Godfather and I are on the two sides of the elevator, and Knobs has his back to the back of the elevator. He's literally leaning against the wall, right? And this kid, probably maybe 14 years old, shirtless, flannel pajama tops, and a plate with hot dogs on it, steps into the elevator. The weirdest thing ever. Steps into the elevator right between all three of us, and then turns around and faces the door. So his back is facing Knobs, who's right behind him. And I'm leaning against the side of leaning my head. I'm high as hell, right? I'm leaning my head against the side of the elevator wall. And I'm looking at this kid's plate of hot dogs. And I'm going, "What chick is this fucking 14-year-old going to impress?" That's what's going through my head. Like, what room is this kid going to go find this girl and present her with a plate of hot dogs? And then I see Knobs lean his head forward over top of the kid's shoulder. And he goes, "Hey, kid." And the kid kind of shrieks down like this. And he goes, "Give me one of them hot dogs." And without any hesitation, just confident, this kid just, because he kind of screeched down when he heard the yelling, and then he just kind of rolls his shoulders back without any hesitation. He turns 180 degrees with his plate of hot dogs, and he looks up at Knobs' eyes, eye to eye, like looks up at him eye to eye and says, "How about I just kick your ass, mate?" And at that time, the doors opened up. I came out of the elevator. I was dying laughing. I'm just like, "Oh my God, that's the funniest thing ever." And then I look into the elevator and Godfather's just dying. We're just howling at this. And I look up into the elevator and I see the kid's back and he's still facing Knobs. And Knobs is like this. And now Knobs starts like doing the sidestep to walk in a circle around the kid, still keeping eye contact. And you just see him walking slowly in a circle around the kid. And as Knobs' back comes to the door, he steps 1 foot out of the door, and the kid just kept turning. As Knobs is like walking around him, looking at him, the kid just stayed right in the middle of the elevator looking, but turning. at Knobs. And then when Knobs steps out and the door starts to close, Knobs goes, I asked nicely. Knobs is, I don't know if you know Knobs very well, but he's a funny guy to hang out with. He will create memories that you will tell stories about forever. It's unbelievable, that guy.
And he didn't get a hot dog.
And he didn't get a hot dog.
Why
No,
didn't he
that
just
kid
take
held his
it?
ground.
He should have
Just
gone,
take it, right? It was like a little
I know.
14-year-old kid. You know, he was going to some chick's room up there with a plate of hot dogs, right? Flannel pajama tops, completely shirtless. That kid was on his game.
Hey, you've got to impress the ladies a different way down under. You know what I'm saying?
Right?
Just very quickly, right? There's two things I want to say. Right, so you said puff puff pass. I just want to tell you that round here we don't call it that. We call it two blast taxi. So
okay, hold on. This is new to me. Two blast taxi.
Taxi, yeah. So we go two blast taxi. We don't. Someone else does. And and then there's always inevitably someone who holds onto it for a bit too long, and then they get dubbed hungry lungs. So then we've got. Yep.
Hungry lungs. We call them bogarts. Bogarts. When they hold on to it too long, you're bogarting that joint too long. Come on, pass it around. You call them what again?
Hungry lungs.
Hungry lungs.
Yeah.
And what's the other one?
Two
or
blast.
Puff Puff Pass?
Yeah, two blast taxi.
Two blast taxi and hungry lungs. Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna start using that over here now.
I thought you'd like those things. I just got the thumbs up from Chris. I think that means our time is up on the psychiatrist couch that is this interview. Listen, thank you so much for spending 2 more hours with me. 2 hours more sometime soon. Please do.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on here, brother.
Yeah. Before I let you go, got any plugs you want to share with us? I see you've got a t-shirt with maybe something.
Yeah, this is our, if you ever come to Arizona, we got MPX concentrates down in Arizona. We're one of the premier concentrate brands in Arizona. So you got your waxes, your batters, all your vape cartridges, really good quality cannabis products down there. So right now we have them in Arizona, Nevada, Florida, New Jersey, Maryland. And I think they're just getting ready to open a shop up in New York as well. So yeah, MPX, man, that's where it's at right now. Heck yeah. Melting Point Extracts. And then of course, if you want to find me on YouTube, you can find my activist channel. It's Top Shelf Anarchy. And then on same on Twitter as well, and on Gab, it's all Top Shelf Anarchy. But I only post my activist stuff there. If you want to follow me for everything else on Twitter, it's Val Venis ENT, which is short for entertainment, Val Venis Entertainment. And you can find me that on Twitter and on Instagram with that same handle.
There we go. Then I look forward to part 3. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much, Val, as well.
Well, thank you, James. Appreciate it, brother.